Secrets of the past are bubbling to the surface in today's video. I'll be investigating the lost tomb of Gilgamesh, British giants, and the curious mysticism of Kali Yuga. The tomb of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, the legendary hero who happened to be the protagonist of the first epic narrative in human history. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written around 2150 BC, predates even Homer's Iliad and Odyssey by over 1500 years. Gilgamesh may have been the first famous hero, the original Hercules, the template for Jesus, and so much more. But was he a real person? And did archaeologists really find his tomb? The historical evidence for Gilgamesh as a real person is controversial. There are mentions of him everywhere in ancient Mesopotamia. He was allegedly responsible for building the walls of Uruk. There are clay tablets discussing how Gilgamesh went in search of the meaning of life. He can be found on the Sumerian king list. His name is mentioned enough to make it seem as if he were real. But if archaeologists are going on texts alone as evidence, then Jesus was a real person too, and so was Noah, and so were the Nephilim. Text is not archaeological proof that something existed. Anybody can write anything down. They've been doing it for 5,000 years. In 2010, a German expedition discovered the ruins of Uruk, the city Gilgamesh supposedly ruled. Within the ruins were what, at the time, the experts believed would turn out to be the remnants of King Gilgamesh's grave. In an interview 13 years ago, Jörg Fassbinder told the BBC the ruins looked very similar to what was described in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's been nearly a decade and a half, and archaeologists still haven't confirmed whether Gilgamesh's tomb is in the ruins of Uruk. Though I should mention Uruk itself has been meticulously studied. There are over 100 hectares of ruins which have been compared to Venice. Although the ancient city lies buried under the Iraqi desert now, it was once a bountiful paradise. Somewhere here could be the bones of Gilgamesh, the first king of the world. In the ancient Egyptian city of Abydos, a tomb was discovered that may have contained the very first king in the world. The tomb is seriously old, predating the Egyptian pyramids by a lot. It's called Tomb UJ. According to John Darnell, a professor in Egyptology from Yale University, the tomb is from 3320 BC. When somebody is talking about periods in Egyptian history, they're usually talking about dynasties. For example, King Tut ruled in the 18th dynasty, but the mysterious ruler buried in Tomb UJ ruled in Dynasty 0. He would have been the very first king of a unified kingdom in Egypt. Prior to this person, there is no other evidence of a single man leading the masses of the Nile, or for that matter, anywhere else in the world. In Egypt's western desert, John Darnell discovered scraps of pottery relating to this original ruler. The pottery shards have the images of a scorpion above a falcon. He says this likely represented the ruler's name, so he's been nicknamed King Scorpion. Nobody knows what his real name was, but I think King Scorpion fits pretty well for the original Egyptian pharaoh. There are more unanswered questions though. Researchers still want to know how the very first king came to power and why. Darnell has spent decades studying these very questions. He thinks King Scorpion was the leader of an epic battle. He would have been on the winning side of the conflict, a conflict that forced individual communities to band together as a unified kingdom. This would have been a very small kingdom with basic ideas of government and rules, but with time it grew to be ancient Egypt. Here's an interesting fact to impress your friends with. The whole idea for kings most likely came from the need to organize labor. Anthropologists think the first kings were little more than craftsmen who organized farmers, shepherds, and laborers. This was how the managerial class emerged. The person at the top, the one who seized the most power, became considered a king. Then, as cultures evolved, kings began connecting themselves to the gods. Claiming authority from deities became justification for ruling. By saying Zeus or Horus or God gifted you the authority to rule other men, you were legitimizing your place on the throne. This was why Egyptian pharaohs considered themselves divine. And now for number 6. But first, it's shout-out time. I wanted to give a big thank you to Brandy Hines 7390 and Yay Publishing for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. The Begmore Giants. The Begmore Stone Circle is a much less famous version of Stonehenge in Northern Ireland. It's a place rich in mythology and unexplainable legends. Legends of giant trolls and Neolithic star watchers. The stone circle is actually multiple stone circles. There are 7 stone circles nestled in the moorlands of the Sperrin Mountains. Thousands of years ago, this was an important ritual landscape to the Celts and other tribes who called Northern Ireland home. Evidence of human activity has been found in the region from about 5,000 years ago. The stone circles weren't found until the 1930s, when a local worker stumbled upon them by accident. Since then, over 1,200 stones have been uncovered at the foothills of the mountains. Nobody has been able to figure out what the stone circles were used for, though most archaeologists think it had something to do with the stars. If you're familiar with other stone circles across Europe, you already know how obsessed archaeologists are with connecting ancient constructs to the cosmos. It's no different in Begmore. The circles were allegedly used to record the movements of the sun and moon. They may have acted as a kind of calendar to identify lunar and solar events. Some of the stones are even marked by a chisel in what could be the ancient Celtic script called Ogham. If the markings could ever be recreated and deciphered, they might finally reveal the secret truth of all stone circles across Great Britain. I mentioned giant trolls earlier, and I'm not about to disappoint anybody. There are several giant troll sculptures in the Sperrin Mountains. They were created by Danish artist Thomas Dambo, who's using recycled material to build 1,000 troll sculptures across the world. But the Neolithic landscape of Begmore is home to stories of real giants as well. Researchers have even identified what's known as the giant gene in the people living in this part of Northern Ireland. 1 out of every 150 local residents carries the gene. It causes too much growth hormone to be produced, which creates shockingly big people. Geneticists think the gene can be traced back 2,500 years to a spectacularly large person. Could people in Northern Ireland really be descendants of giants? The vanishing Mayans. 19 million people vanished when the Maya civilization collapsed around 1,100 years ago. Yes, it's true that the descendants of the Maya still live in Mexico today, but their powerful civilization hasn't had any power since the 9th century. Something terrible happened to the Maya, something so apocalyptic that cities like Palenque and Chichen Itza emptied overnight. After thriving since long before the birth of Christ, the Maya packed up and left. It's one of the greatest secrets scientists have never been able to solve. Did the disappearance of the Maya have anything to do with an alien invasion? Were there supernatural forces involved? Was it a plague, civil war, or drought? American geographer and historian Jared Diamond believes it was drought and deforestation. He wrote a book on the collapse of the Maya, blaming self-created environmental sabotage. Studies have shown that cutting down too many trees resulted in fewer clouds, which over the course of a century reduced rainfall. Crops withered and died. Cities overflowed with disease. Chaos and anarchy reigned supreme as the Maya civilization fractured, gave a whimper, and was no more. The Book of Giants. The Dead Sea Scrolls were dug out of a series of caves near the Dead Sea in Israel. In the 1940s and 1950s, hundreds of fragmented scrolls were removed from the Qumran caves. Written upon the scrolls are texts from the Bible, along with Jewish texts that never made it into the official Bible. It was one of the most important religious discoveries ever, but not everything found has gone mainstream. One of the texts discovered in the caves is the controversial Book of Giants. The Book of Giants is not something you're going to find in any version of the Bible. It only exists within the Dead Sea Scrolls, and many parts of it are missing or too damaged to read. But what has been interpreted from the ancient text is shocking. The book describes the Nephilim's reign on planet Earth. The Nephilim are mentioned in the Bible. They only appear briefly as the offspring of fallen angels and human women. The passage about the Nephilim has been interpreted in many ways over the past 2,000 years. Generally, scholars agree the Nephilim were representations of beings who were born through the unholy union of treacherous angels and mortals. The Book of Giants goes into way more detail about the Nephilim. It's almost a whole new story. The Dead Sea Scroll says Nephilim really did live on Earth. They were a mighty race of giants who were stronger and more formidable than humans. They were smarter too, and corrupted humanity like teaching them sorcery and magic. They also engaged in cannibalism and often ate humans as snacks. As I mentioned earlier in the video, documents don't prove anything is real. Just because somebody wrote about giants 2,000 years ago doesn't mean the Nephilim were running around eating people, but it's certainly a compelling piece of evidence. What's your take on the Nephilim? Kali Yuga. Hinduism is one of the most culturally rich and complex religions in the world, yet outside India and other parts of Asia, people know very little about it. I'm going to pick one part of Hinduism to tell you about, just to give you an idea of what you're missing. It could explain why things kind of suck right now all over the world. In Hindu cosmology, existence is a circle. There is no start and there is no end. Instead, a perpetual cycle of world ages continues on and on for eternity. There is Satya, which is considered the Golden Age. It's a time of great prosperity, happiness, and peace. Then there is Treta Yuga, the Silver Age. It's not as good as the Golden Age, but things could definitely be worse. Dvapara Yuga is the Bronze Age of existence, worse than the other two, but still not the absolute worst. The absolute worst is Kali Yuga. According to Hinduism, it's the age we're currently living in. The idea behind the four ages is that each one deteriorates a little bit. There is a decline in righteousness and spirituality. Humanity becomes more and more immoral as the years go by, until the human race enters Kali Yuga. It is the bottom of the pit, an age in which, to put it simply, everything sucks. So how long do the bad times last? I hate to say it, but we are not even a little bit close to getting out of the dark times. Ancient Indian texts claim Kali Yuga started with the death of Vishnu's 8th avatar, Krishna. That was about 5,000 years ago. The cycle of Kali Yuga is supposed to last for 1,200 divine years. Unfortunately for you and me, that equals 432,000 human years. The worst age in Hindu cosmology won't end until 428,899 AD. Who were the Picts? The most mysterious ancient society in Scottish history is the Picts. They were a sophisticated, sometimes barbaric, unconquerable group during the Iron Age. The Romans couldn't defeat them, nor could pretty much anyone else who tried. They lasted from roughly 79 to 843 AD. They left a lasting legacy in Scotland, greatly impacting the nation's culture. Yet scientists know very little about them. The one piece of the puzzle that seems hardest to solve is the origin of the Picts. The most popular theory is that there was a confederation of 7 main kingdoms, but because the Picts left nothing behind in writing, there's little information to go on. The Romans never managed to push into northern Scotland to defeat the Picts, so the Romans couldn't make any detailed records of their cultures or traditions. Although it was the Romans who named them the Picts. The name comes from the Latin word picti. In English, it means the painted people. The Romans named them this because the Picts were notorious for their war paint. You might be wondering how the Romans could have possibly failed when they were so often victorious. What happened in northern Scotland was very similar to what happened in Gaul, or the area of what's now Germany. When Julius Caesar attacked Gaul, the various tribes united under a single leader to form a resistance. This was what the Picts did when the Roman Empire invaded. Separate tribes gathered under a common leader to fight back the invaders. The Romans tried 3 times to conquer Scotland, which they called Caledonia. They failed so epically, they eventually built Hadrian's Wall and gave up. Who were the Templars? The Knights Templar got their start when Christian forces took Jerusalem in 1099. As Europeans started making pilgrimages to the Holy Lands, the Knights Templar rose as a force of mighty warriors to protect them from bandits. Their status as warriors propelled them to unexpected heights. Soon they were fighting on the front lines of the Crusades and growing into a powerful political force. If you're a fan of the Templars, you presumably know this stuff already. So let me give you some juicy information that isn't common knowledge. For example, did you know the Knights Templar were some of the earliest bankers? They allowed travelers to deposit cash and valuables at any designated Templar church. There was one in the city of London. A special letter of credit was given to the depositor of the money. Then that person could travel to Jerusalem, where they exchanged the letter of credit for money. This allowed people to travel vast distances without potentially being robbed of all their worldly possessions. The banking system helped the Templars get extraordinarily rich. Their understanding of global issues helped them maintain. Some scholars think the Knights Templar copied ideas from the Muslim world, transforming the West forever. In England, the Templars introduced innovative ideas for maintaining colleges and transforming laws. The ideas came from what they saw in the Middle East. England can thank much of their success in the art and education departments to the Templars' Muslim influences. Which ancient civilization from the British Isles is your favorite? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and come back soon for all the latest videos from the channel.